thank you for joining me again today as we go through this journey of preparedness and awareness. Uh, if you've followed me for any length of time, you know that one of the things I preach a lot is just having a situational awareness. We throw that phrase around a lot, but the truth is, it's something that we probably take for granted in the modern world. Uh, but in this case, I'm going to ask for your situational awareness, not around you in the street to prevent a mugging or when you're driving for your own safety. Today, I want to talk about society as a whole, and this is going to be a little bit different than a lot of my other videos because this one in particular is going to go into a historical event, not a future or potential event. Something that has actually happened, and something that at the end of it was so horrendous that millions of people lost their lives, and it changed the world and history as we know it from that point on. And so, what I want to do today is talk about my visit to the Holocaust Museum. The Holocaust Museum is located, at least this particular one, in Dallas, Texas. Ironically, it is you can see the building where Lee Harvey Oswald shot Kennedy in the 1960s down the street. You can literally see one building from the other when you're walking in, and it's a rather profound experience. I've visited both. I'm going to go back to both, and I'm going to try and do videos of both because I know not everybody in our community has the luxury or the blessing, if you will, to have a job that sends them different places, and you get these little breaks or something cancels, and I'm like, wow, this would really be cool to see. And I actually do take pictures of a lot of this so that I can share it with all of you, because I think it's important for all of us to understand what's happened in the past, because it can't happen again. We all know this. We've talked about it in the preparedness and the aware community, and that's really what we are. So when you go to Dallas, Texas, there is a Holocaust Museum, and the Holocaust Museum itself is a rather profound building. The building is actually undergoing a renovation at this time, but the building itself is just phenomenal. It's a gray facade, and it almost looks like a fortress. It's right in the middle of what I guess you could consider the historical district. You have the Dallas Tower, the what I believe they call the Renewal Tower or the Renaissance Tower. I can't remember exactly. And then it's the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. And the pictures probably don't do it any justice because it's just such a phenomenal place. And the day I walked in, there actually was a display in the front, and I'm going to show pictures of all this as I talk about it. The Aaron family lobby, the Aaron family had donated substantial amounts of time and money to make this happen. This is a 2 or 3 story building, if I recall correctly, and it's just phenomenal. You walk in there, and it's almost haunting. I don't know how else to say it. You walk in, and the first displays they had, which were rolling displays in this particular incident or event when I went there, was the liberation on film, and then the liberators giving medical assistance to the victims. Now, a lot of the footage is coming from the Allied side, from the American, British, Canadian, Australian, French. There's not as much footage from the Russian side or the Eastern Front, if you will, which was equally horrendous. But you walk up this building, and there's a plaza, and there's a glass wall, and this glass wall, all it has is literally the names of hundreds of people who donated and families who lost relatives, grandparents, whatever, in this in the Holocaust, in the concentration camps. One of the first things you see as you go through is a display of the upstander, and the upstander is their definition, or they define the upstander as someone who stands up for the rights of other people and for their own rights. They try to combat injustice, unfairness, inequality. And when they see something wrong, they try to make it right. And I thought that was an interesting contrast to the plaque right next to it, which talked about collaborators, and it's people who actively help do something horrendous. They take part, they turn in relatives. And this is something we witnessed on a very small scale during 2020, where people were like, you didn't get your magic juice, you didn't comply, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. And people were openly on the internet saying, well, those people should be put in camps. Those people are bad people. They're evil. They're they should be put in jail. They should be hurt in many cases. And having gone to this museum at the tail end, so I went in 20, toward the tail end of the Rona, having witnessed everything that happened during COVID, and it just blew my mind. The upstander versus, and then there's the, I guess the public, the sheep who do nothing. They see what's going on, but they don't participate, they don't collaborate, nor do they flee. And that was very touching to me personally. I personally took that as a sign to try to be an upstander. And I'm no none of us is perfect. I'm sure we've all had our bad days, but I think it's important for us to understand that that kind of mentality of trying to do the right thing, trying to stand for what's right is important because we witnessed it firsthand from 2020 to 2021, almost 2022, where people were actively saying, if you don't do this, you should be put in jail. You should be hurt. We should burn your house. We should shoot your dog. I mean, I've heard all these things. And people don't realize what a horrendous slope that is to fall down. Um, but anyway, that was where you walk in, and that was very touching to me. Being that I grew up in a neighborhood that had a lot of Jewish kids, and I met some of the grandparents of my friends who had the numbers on their forearms, who had been there, or who were military, who had liberated a camp. And whether they were a liberator or survivor, whenever they talked about it, they cried. Um, so it's important for us to stand up against those kind of atrocities, and they happen very slowly and subtly, which is why you should always try to call it out. But anyway, before I go off on a further rant, continuing the tour, as you go through the building, you start the tour actually upstairs. So you go up these flights of stairs, and there are these big landings. They have a movie screen opposite the landing, and I'll have a photo of that as well. And each section they show a snippet, like a 1 or 2 minute film on aspects of the Holocaust, how they built the museum, interviews they had with survivors, children of survivors. And it's really touching as you go through, and on the walls are family photos that were donated by the families affected by this. And it wasn't just about the Holocaust. They talked about things that have happened in Darfur, Sudan, the Middle East, and China. Um, there's ugliness. There is horrendous behavior all across the world, not just against Jews or blacks or Asians or whites. I mean, people can be horrendous across the board, and it's very eye opening. And even as a history buff that I am, to kind of see that, to go through that. So anyway, you go up and you see all these families, and then when you start the tour, there's this another plaque, and it's a quote from Adolf Hitler in 1942, and it says, "The discovery of the Jewish virus is one of the greatest revolutions that has taken place in the world. We shall regain our health only by eliminating the Jew." It was February 2nd in 1942. And think about that. Think of the language we heard in 2020 and 2021 when we actually saw the worst of some people come out. And they were like, you're not complying. You're not doing this. You're not taking this medicine, or you're not wearing this piece of clothing. You don't vote for the right person. You should be eliminated. And people just don't grasp if they've never seen ugliness, not even street ugliness. I'm talking horrendousness. You just don't appreciate it. You really don't. Um, and then they go on to give some perspective on Hitler's viewpoints as well as the viewpoints of other leading Nazis and communists and whatnot. Um, one other quote from him back in the 1930s was rational anti Semitism, its final objective must be the removal of the Jews altogether. And it shows a picture of Hitler when he just took power. And it was interesting because the Nazi Party subsidized and supported the brown shirts who did Kristallnacht, which they broke all the windows in the Jewish shops. They raped women. They beat people up. They did all this horrendousness. And the minute he took power, in order to show he would reclaim law and order, which he and his friends had created the lawlessness in the first place, um, he went and had a bunch of the brown shirts arrested and executed. Useful idiots, Stalin calls that type of person. They incite a group to go and do something horrendous to achieve an end, to get a leader elected. And then once that leader's in place, well, now that person's not worthy anymore. So, again, a lot of echoes in 2020, 2022. Now, obviously, there weren't concentration camps, but that's how it starts. It's subtle behavior, it's public speaking, dehumanizing others. Um, there's some graphics there that show how the Weimar Republic very slowly became basically majority Nazi in the elections. Um, Basically, in 1919, the Weimar was established after World War One, and there were coalition governments, but no party was able to get a majority, and they wound up in a very polarized environment where it was either yay or nay. Sound familiar, right? And ultimately, the Nazis were able to rise to power, and part of it was violence. They attacked what they call them Republicans. They weren't like our Republicans. They were people who believed in the Republic, and then there were communists who wanted communism, and the Nazis basically went after both groups to eliminate any desire to run for office. Very often beating up the competing politicians so they wouldn't get elected. Uh, Part of the reason that happened was because of Germany's treatment during World War One at the end of the war, because even though they didn't start it, they got blamed for a lot of it. The treaty required Germany to surrender territory, reduce its military. The new government hence had no money, and so it was ineffective. It was unstable. Then they had massive inflation, and then political life became very violent, very polarized. Again, we're seeing that now: massive inflation, polarization, dehumanizing people we don't agree with. And then up comes this one leader who was the supposed to fix it all. Um, there were a lot of Jews who were being assaulted, so many of them moved. Now you have immigration because one country's politics are unsustainable for family. So a lot of Jewish immigrants started to flee. They went to British-controlled Palestine, which ultimately became Israel. Um, they were fleeing to Czechoslovakia. They fled to Russia. They fled to Poland. That's why Russia had so many Jewish communities. And, during the Cold War where people migrated to the U.S., that's why you have these large Russian Jewish communities in Brooklyn and Chicago, because they were fleeing Germany. They would stamp their passports with a J, right? Oh, you're not in compliance. You get a special letter, or you don't get a letter. We talked about passports, special passports for the Rona. Oh, you can't go to a concert. You can't go to a restaurant without your passport, without your app. We need to track you. We have to scan how many boosters you've had. And again, I'm not knocking whether you agree or disagree with vaccinations or how things were done. The fact that these exact same things have happened before, it floors me. It blows my mind. Um, the Nazi Party coordinated Kristallnacht, which is basically attacks on Jewish businesses in response to the assault of a German diplomat by a Jew in another country. Actually, it was in Paris. The guy got assaulted there. He wound up getting killed, and so the response was all the Germans who were anti-Jew basically attacked all the stores. Um, A lot of people condemned the attacks, but there was little support to increase the immigration or to actually help them. So there was a lot of this, but no changes. Um, Britain finally agreed to allow children to come in to Britain and to Canada who had relatives there. So the British wound up taking in a lot of kids, and they referred to that as kinder transport. Um, After that Crystal Night, they just sent those kids. And again, you see people being displaced because they're not compliant, because they're not checking the right boxes. And again, it's so easy for us on the internet now to just say, screw this guy or screw that guy. But the reality of it is, at the end of the day, people get hurt. People died in this case. Um, they even show a young family, Bert Romberg and Maggie First. They were in Germany, and after World War II, they were adopted uh, by a family in England, and ultimately settled in Dallas and became a very good business family there. So it's kind of funny that some of the best people we have in America got run out of other countries. Um, they even went so far as to create the Nuremberg racial laws, and I'll have a picture of that as well. And basically, it has different categories: your 100% Aryan, your other, your gypsy, or your Jewish, and then it has a chart, almost like a breeding chart. Like, so if you have this two and this one, you are considered under 0.14 or 1/8 Jew, and therefore your Jewish heritage is diluted enough. But if you were over the 1/8, then you were not considered diluted, and you had too much Jewish in you or too much black in you as well. It was basically a whole law and a chart, and I never knew about this chart, and I love history. Never knew about this chart, just floored me. Um, and even when they went to the concentration camps, they had colors and symbols that were assigned to different people, whether they were gay or Jewish or black or whatever ethnicity, or they were a military prisoner, and everyone got treated differently. Foreign forced labor, even Jehovah's Witnesses literally had their own category. Jehovah's Witnesses versus like a Protestant, political fiends, or political foes, rather fiends. Political foes had a certain color triangle. It was absolutely crazy. Um, there's a quote from Martin Niemöller, and it says the targets of persecution. First, they came for the communists. I did not speak out because I was not a communist. They came for the trade unionists. I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. And that's how it happens, folks. When we allow people to victimize other, or hurt others, when we allow the ugliness, regardless of what you feel personally, we can disagree on political viewpoints or the law, or politics or economics. But when I go and say, you know what, it's okay if they beat you up in the street, it's okay if they hurt your wife or your children, then I become a collaborator. At the least, I become indifferent, and that's bad enough. But when you actively think it's okay and you encourage it, you become a collaborator. And the role collaboration played in the Holocaust just blew my mind. Um, there was one map in particular. It showed. So we all know about the 7 or 8 big concentration camps. Bergen-Belsen's, Auschwitz. Forgot the names of the others, but there were over 2,300 killing sites, where anywhere from 500 to 10,000 people were killed at all these sites. 2,300. These were not concentration camps; they were killing sites, because a local commander said, "I can't give the troops. I can't move my assets to put all these Jews in the camp, so we're just going to shoot them all here, or we're going to burn them, or hang them, or run them over." Um, and seeing that map, it literally was everywhere. It was all across Europe. I mean, there were hundreds. You couldn't even, the map was a big map, maybe 20 by 20. I could not put my hand on the map in Russia or in Ukraine or in Poland and not hit one of those markers. And this was a massive map. I mean, it just it floors you when you see that. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of small concentration camps where they housed everyone from military prisoners to Jews to mentally retarded, mentally ill folks. It didn't matter. It literally was murder all across that continent. Um, there were over 1,200 ghettos, 1,239 concentration camps, and 102 POW and forced labor camps, and then six, okay, I stand corrected, six big death camps, although two of the concentration camps could probably be included in the death camps. And again, that's just the amount of how that works, the amount of death, the amount of money and time that was invested in this ugliness to kill other people. I mean, I did not realize. We always thought, oh, there was six or eight big camps. No, there were thousands of smaller ones, thousands, and you know, they they even had a rail car at this museum, and it was one of the actual rail cars that had been captured by the Allies. Was in a museum in Germany, and then they sent it to this place. And they said 120 people would fit in this rail car, and I tried to fit in the rail car. So what I did, the Red Cross says if you do a people shelter, you need a 6x4 space for a bunk. There's no way you'd get 6x4. So what I did, I stepped out the the train car, right? It was a box car, so I stepped out. I think it was 15 feet by 30 feet, something like that. And then I stood in one corner, and I had my wife kind of estimate how much space I took standing straight upright, just like a soldier. And I took about, just assuming you have room for your elbows and whatnot, like a 2 feet by a foot and a half. So I took like this 2 by 2 square on the floor plan. And I did the math, and if you could, they said they would put up to 120 people in there. If you put 120 people in there, you literally were all standing, nobody could sit. I just did the math in my head. I was like, okay, so if each person takes like a foot by a foot and they squish in, um, nobody could sit. They literally, if you had to go to the bathroom, you peed or pooped standing up in this car. There was no ventilation. It had little slots on the top. Cattle get better ventilation, and this just blew my mind. The ugliness, the math that was done, and this was thought out. The whole process, the layout of the camps, it was all thought out, and it just blew my mind that you look at the first of the big death camps, right? Not the smaller ones, and it looks like a factory. Like if you didn't know what it was, and I just showed you the blueprint, you'd be like, that factory's pretty well laid out. And then you look at these blueprints, and by the time you get to like Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen, those big camps, they had train tracks and routes planned out, and smaller trains and light rails bringing people to this place and that in the camp. If you didn't know what it was, you'd look at that blueprint and say, that's a really well laid out automotive plant. And then you realize it was the opposite of building. It was a murder plant. Um, Seeing this kind of stuff, I got to tell you, it's haunting. It really floored me. They also went on, once you're done with the Holocaust part, they go on to show murders that have been done for diamonds in Africa, for plants in South America, the treatment of Hawaiians in the islands, murders and rapes in Bosnia between Jews and Christians and Muslims, um, and things that the communists did, Pol Pot and Mao, and just the amount. But it all started with people either turning a blind eye or even worse, collaborating because they were angry at that other side. And, you start seeing things like the Rwandan genocide, and it's just, holy cow, the number of people that were killed because they were from the wrong tribe or they didn't prescribe to a certain subculture or color. Um, it's really hard to fully appreciate. But going through this museum and seeing the things that were done for oil, for gas, for gold, for diamonds, for ideology, for power, um, and then having just gone through the Rona and the shutdowns and the mandatory this and the mandatory that, and oh, you're not compliant, so you can't go out. You can't go and see your family. You can't see grandma. Um, Honestly, it makes me wonder, and this is just my opinion, if the American people were not armed, if they were not connected, they were not the type of people we are. Even Canada took a beating in their civil rights, and they were still vocal. They went and protested in the capital, and they blocked up highways. In other countries, were they just shooting them? Were they killing? What did China do? Because we all know it was way worse than we were led on. So a lot of painful things to witness, and I think the as you're leaving, there's one last plaque, two two displays as you're leaving this museum, and one is the 10 stages of genocide, and I'll read it to you. It said, Professor Gregory Stanton developed a model to understand the process of genocide. It was 10 stages, and he said genocide develops in 10 stages that are predictable but not inevitable. You can predict what comes next, but you can stop it. Preventive measures can potentially stop it, and it becomes classification. Did you not vote for so and so? Did you not take a medicine? Did you not wear this or wear that? Then symbolization. They start associating you. You know, you're this, you're that. They start making memes. They make memes now, but then they'd put a patch on you. Then discrimination. Oh, you didn't do this. You're not compliant. We're going to discriminate against you. Then dehumanization. You know what? If you don't get your medicine, you're a murderer. We should burn your house. We're gonna march in your neighborhood, and if you don't show us your medicine card, we're gonna burn your house. We heard this stuff. I heard it. Then you see organization. Then you see even more polarization. And then you start seeing the preparation. They start building camps. Australia had this happen. They built camps and they physically put people there. Then persecution. We saw that as well. People getting arrested, people getting thrown out of restaurants. Um, you're not compliant. We're going to check your papers. You're out in the park. We're going to check your papers. And then ultimately comes extermination. Let's get rid of them. They don't see the world the way we do. And then typically after that is denial. We have no idea what happened. That's not what we said. We never said that. We never said these meds were perfect. We never said, no, 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 no. We never. Did we not hear that at the end of 2020, the episode of 2020 to 2022? Did we not hear those? Not so much the extermination, although a lot of people were allowed to die. Why would you put patients with the elderly? You're sentencing the elderly to death doing that. So was there an extermination? I mean, that's up to you. That's a very harsh view of it, I grant you. But think about that. And then denial. We never said that. I'm not affiliated with that company. I don't have that company's stock that made all this magic medicine. Folks, we witnessed a small microcosm of what these folks went through. Nowhere near as bad. Clearly, there were no concentration camps. People weren't dying by the millions. But the behaviors were there, and the only reason it didn't escalate is because people fought back. People stood up. People made voice. Some went to protest. Some got on the internet like me, put on a headset, and preached to the masses. I've been threatened. I've been told things because, oh, what you're saying is nonsense. What you're saying is evil. But folks, I mean, think about it. You saw the worst come out in people. Imagine if nobody spoke up. Imagine if nobody fought back. How bad would it have been? How bad was it in other places and we never saw it? And just going through this museum right after we all went through that, I guess the timing was very apropos because it really floored me. It really, really floored me. And I hope if you ever get the blessing of being able to visit one of these places, to go to one of these places, and understand that. I went to Amsterdam even on one business trip. I got to see the house Anne Frank hid in. Unfortunately, I didn't know it was right there by the train station, so I didn't get to. You have to make reservations, so I couldn't go in. But I got to see it. I got to see these buildings where these people hid their friends because they were trying to be upstanding. And many of the people who helped the Jews or the blacks or whoever it was that the Nazis were after, and they got caught, they also went to the camps with their friends. This is deep stuff, and it's not my typical video. Uh, but I wanted to touch on this because it's important that we say it. It's important we not forget. And it's important that we understand that these things do happen and they can be prevented. But people need to step up and do the right thing. So pay attention to what's going on around you. Your situational awareness is not just in the presence of who you are or where you are. Your situational awareness should also be what's going on in your community, in your neighborhood, in your state or your province or your country. And if it's not right, don't hesitate to say something. The worst thing we can do is not say anything. So, folks, this was a very deep conversation. Like I said, it's not my typical conversation, but I was looking at the photos and I'd been putting it off, and I said, you know what? I'm going to put the Holocaust video together, the Holocaust Museum video together, because I think we witnessed little pieces of what happened then in the last 3 years. And these are the things we got to watch out for. And these are the things we got to teach our kids, our youth, our young adults. This shit happens. And it can happen again. So, folks, with that one, prayers and blessings to all of you. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed the little video tour and my narration. If my narration sucked, you can mute me and watch the video again. You know, that's fine too. If you have any questions and I don't get to premiere this particular video, feel free to comment below the video and I'll try to answer any questions I can. If you do happen to go to Dallas and get time for it, you may want to slot at least 3 hours. I actually went they opened, I think, at 8:15 in the morning. I didn't leave till my wife and I didn't leave we walked the whole thing and we didn't leave till almost lunch. But we took our time. We read, we took photos, we talked to other people. It was touching and it was mind blowing too. So guys, until next time, God bless, Godspeed. You guys pay attention to what's going on. Be safe out there, and I will see you in the next video. Stay blessed. Take care.